Welcome to episode 54 of How to Play Like a WoW Pro. Today we're going to be taking a look at a replay from Ichaztelon. I still don't know how to say his name. If I do like 6 replays and I still don't know his name, it's because I'm like bulk recording and he hasn't responded on Discord yet about how to say his name. He's got the number 5555, Object 780, which is pretty dope. I guess I should talk a little bit about the Object 780, my opinion on it, and I guess equipment to run for it, whatnot, and what it's good and bad at. So this tank is not as straightforward as the S-Conq for what equipment you should run. The S-Conq, it's pretty obvious. HP turbo rammer. Like, probably 80% of top players would all agree that that's like your standard loadout. Like, some might drop turbo for vents or something, but that's like the minority of people. This tank, I've heard so many different equipment loadouts, what to use. And the reason why is this thing gets set on fire so much, and it gets ammo wrecked a shit ton. So there are a lot of people who are a fan of running config on this thing. It's not slow. It goes like 40, I think 49 with max field mods, but it's not quite as fast as something like a 277. So I've seen a lot of people run Bond Turbo on it. I've seen people run HP. Seen people run V-Stab. I've seen people run Vents. I've seen people run... I haven't seen people run Aiming Unit until now. I'm not sure why he's using Aiming Unit over Vents, because the base accuracy of this tank is already pretty good. Maybe it's because the low pen. But I usually, unless the base accuracy of a tank is pretty bad, like on the STB1 or the let's see, what's a good example of like the M48 Patton, I'll use Vents over Aiming Unit just for the better reload mostly, and the better fully aimed oh well, you still get some fully aimed accuracy even with Vents. It's just not as much as the Aiming Unit. But what I usually like to run, and what I think the best loadout is for most games, is what he had for his first loadout, and that's a Turbo V-Stab Rammer. Even though this tank has pretty good base dispersion values when on the move and turning the turret, V-Stab in general is just better than Vents. Like, even on tanks with really good stabilization. You know, there are a couple exceptions, like probably the M60, and maybe a couple other tanks, but V-Stab is just king. But in this game, he drops the turbo. He decides he doesn't need the turbo. And instead, he brings Aiming Unit. If you're wondering what I run on this thing, right now I'm running Turbo Vents Rammer, but honestly I only did that because I have Bond Vents and I don't have Bond V-Stab. If I were actually tryharding this tank, I would definitely run V-Stab over Vents. And then for my other loadout, I have HP Turbo Rammer, but I would probably drop the second Turbo loadout and just run HP V-Stab Rammer for my other loadout. I'm also a fan of possibly just running Vents V-Stab Rammer. But that was a very long intro, by the way, but I don't know, I wanted to talk about the 780. So steps. Let's look at the matchup first. There's one Artie. It's a tier 10 game, so you're not just gonna roll the enemies. They have a shit ton of TDs. They have a few mediums, and then they have like 4 mediums and like 4 heavies. And it really matters what kind of heavies you're facing, whether you can pen them or not, because this thing has a 311 pen, which isn't great. But in general, you don't want to see Chiefs, you don't want to see Crons, you want to see Juicy S, E100s, Mouse, Then you have like your intermediate heavies like the IS-7 and whatnot. Now what do I usually like to do in steps and heavy tanks? Well, from the south flank, I really don't like to go east unless like I'm top tier and I'm in a cron, because it's very hard to advance along the east because of these bushes back here at this rock. And then it's pretty hard to play in this position here. Very often the north spawn will just win this flank, and so you'll just end up dying because the north has an advantage on this flank. And then this side has a huge advantage on this flank. So that's why I usually go to this flank. And what do I like to do on this flank? Well, you have a couple different options. If you're in a medium tank, you can cross early, and then you can try to play these bushes back here. I think I have some other videos on that, so I'm not going to go in depth into how that works. It's a video in a Progetto. I think I titled the video like OP spot on steps or something. You could probably find it. It's somewhere in my series. If I'm in a heavy tank, what I usually will do is I'll start on this corner. I'll see if anybody's crossing. But I ultimately will want to do a couple things. If I'm top tier and I don't think they have very much over here in this area, then I'll push across the top and I'll take here. And if you look at the map right now, if you look at the heavies, which are the most relevant tanks, they only have 2 unspotted heavies, and it's a 705A and an E100, which are not great heavies. They're going to have a hard time penning the 780. They're usually not as good players as chieftains and whatnot. So pushing on top here is not a bad idea. But your other option is to cross and then to take this position right here. From this position, you can get mostly hull down on this corner. And if they overpoke this corner, you can shoot them. The problem with taking this position in this situation is that they have a 705A, which you're not going to be able to pen. You can't pen his turret for shit. And you're only really going to get damage if they have like some TD up here, because this position also counters this. Or you're going to, what was I going to say? Or you could potentially farm the E100 if he's on this corner. That's like your only options. But the reason why I would opt for this play, regardless of all those reasons why I just explained why it's a bad idea to go here and better to go up here, is simply the fact that he has nobody behind him. So it'd be very risky to YOLO up here. If they have a TD here, you could take a shot coming in, and then he's just kind of stuck here. And if they have tanks over on this ridge, then it's just really hard to play safe. You really need support if you're going to push this, unless you know that like their entire team is over here. So I'm interested to see what he'll do in this situation. Looks like he's just slowly checking out. He's spot checking here. If he gets spotted, he's probably going to blind fire or wait for them to fire and then shoot back. He does get lit. That tells him there's a tank right here. I would probably just blind it immediately, to be honest. It's probably the 268. That's what he does. If you paid attention, that shot just hit. There was no splash. Hopefully it wasn't the V4, because then he probably bounced, but most likely it's the 268 or maybe the Progetto. Now if you notice what he did here, he waited, he pulled back, and he waited around 10 seconds. And so I think he got unlit. He might have pulled forward a little bit too early, but I think he was going to re-spot check this and see if he gets lit. It was a V4, unfortunately, so he doesn't pen him. But the V4 is spotted, so there's no real reason to spot check anymore, because you can just see him. And as you can see here, the 705A was up here, so it's a really good thing that he didn't cross high. He probably would have just died if he went high, so yeah, that would have been way too aggressive, like I was saying. But he still wants to kind of push the tempo if possible, but I don't think he'll get too greedy. He's trying to see if this 705A will poke. And honestly, crossing right now, if the V4 is not here, would probably be a pretty good play, because this E4 just got spotted here. The 705A is up here. I'm pretty sure if you're here, you can shoot the 705A's lower plate. But it's possible he's fully hull down. If he's fully hull down, then crossing here is a bad idea because then you're just going to be stuck against a fully hull down 705A. So there's kind of a risk to it. I'm not sure whether the 705A can stay full safe. But I think playing a little bit passive in this situation is a good idea. But as you can see, his teammates are starting to arrive. So there might be an opportunity where he can push up, but it's still not time to push up. It's still too risky. But as you can see, here comes the E100. He's just YOLOing. And another thing that you can do is actually push to this corner. As long as they're backed off and they don't have too many here and you have backup with you, then you can push to this corner. Now, as you can see, this V4 is angled downwards, so he actually has a pretty decent shot on the top of his tank right now. But here they poke the corner, so he decides to back off again. But he's kind of using this E100 as a meat shield, which is the right thing to do. But if these guys commit, if all of these guys were to commit down, or if this 705A tries to run, then the high ground is definitely the best spot to be, but we'll see what he does. He might not take the high ground until he knows that the 705A is not just going to drive back up. Because if the 705A drives back up, then the high ground is bad. I think the 705A is completely concerned with EBR though, so taking the high ground right in this situation is a good idea. Now the V4, in my opinion, is a priority target, but he's not really poking right now. The reason why is he just has high pen and he's in a really annoying spot because he kind of creates a crossfire. And once you kill the guy at the rock, then you can start working on this guy, and you can, after you kill this guy, then these guys are free kills because you're just above them. So that's the progression of who you would want to kill. And he's pulling up to the rock, first of all, to get safe from anybody who's playing here. But as you can see, they're all spotted, so there's actually, unless the Progetto or E4 rotates back, he's completely fine. But also to get a better angle on the V4 and to get some height on opponents. Now he doesn't have hardening this game, and this is kind of why I like to bring hardening. Is it's easier just to make trades, and like it's almost worth it to trade with a 705A if he had hardening, because then you'd have 2600 HP. If you have the right field, if you have plus HP field mods or whatever, and bond hardening. And then once you kill this guy, even though you've kind of just traded 1-for-1 or whatever, then you get a payoff for it, and you get to kill these guys for basically free. Now unfortunately the Progetto finds an angle on him, which is possible, so it's something you have to watch out for. But you can kind of get hull down on the Progetto. Now the 705A pokes, which is actually really good because first of all he tracks him, and he's going to get in 2 shots for the 705A's 1 shot, most likely. And you need to kill the 705A regardless, so it kind of works out. It's the ideal thing to have happened, even though he takes a shot for it. And as you can see, in between shots, he's trying to keep his turret relatively angled towards him. When he's pulled back down like this, then the Progetto doesn't have a shot really. But if he pulls up like here, then the Progetto does have a slight shot. Goes for the V4. V4 wasn't paying attention. Just kind of lucky, but now he's kind of in the ideal situation. It sucks to be able to have to waste a shell on a 20 HP target, but you kind of don't have a choice. You have to take care of him in that situation. Now the 268 is he's like he's just what's the word? I don't know. Basically he had a hard on for the EBR and he just completely YOLO'd out in the open and let Ichaztelon farm him for free. But here's kind of the payoff stage where you're above them. They basically have very little chance of actually doing anything to him, but he can pen them in return most of the time. The E100 is kind of a struggle with only 300 pen, but you can hit the top bar as he does there. Now pay attention to what's happening. So the eastern flank is dead, and they're down a lot of tanks. This is almost definitely going to be a loss. And this is basically what almost always happens on this map. Like, they're winning this flank, they win that flank. That's almost always what happens. So you're gonna have to start. This is where the game can get tricky because you have to start thinking about whether it's better to go back to base or to push through. Usually the best thing to do is to push through, because if you don't push through, then well, especially when you're already in an advantageous position and you can just kill them for basically free, why would you not just finish them off before heading back? But also, if you don't finish them off, then you kind of just get pincered. Like they're pressuring from this flank and from this flank, and then you're in a really bad spot. So he is trying to finish off these two last tanks if possible. He deals with this guy very well, staying safe but getting a shot in return. You already can probably know that this 268 is not a great player. 268 fires, so he wants to kill the V4, but the 268 kind of over peaks here, and he gets a cheeky shot there. Now the good news is the enemies they're taking a long time to actually push through in the east. So it gives them an opportunity to finish off this flank before having to head back, basically. Now, pay attention to what he does here. He loads HE. This is cheeky as fuck. Pens a Progetto. The HE shells on this thing are not very good, by the way, but I mean, if you know you're gonna pen it, then might as well take the extra damage. There is an arty in this game, so it's something to watch out for. And I was just about to say, you have to be careful when you're finishing off this flank, because enemies very often will push into here. Now, I think he thought he was safe because he's out of render of this, but there's a guy who's pushed up all the way to here, which is kind of surprising that he's not been lit by the Progetto up here. But he takes a shot for that, unfortunately. And as I was saying, there's already, so you have to watch out for that. Now, hopefully you can shoot the Progetto, but the Progetto gets into cover. And now you have a couple different options here. So it's just you and the E100 over here. And the fact that the enemies have not pushed through, besides taking K0, tells me that they are not planning to push through. Like, they might, a couple of them might, but there's almost certainly 2 or 3 tanks that have come back to base. So you have to be very careful here since you're only with the E100. It's unlikely they'll re-push this, but they could be in this area. And so your two options, in my opinion, are to come up here and then go take A3. Once you take A3, it's very hard to re-push this, and then you might be able to kill the arty potentially if you didn't get all the way out. And anybody who plays like on this ridge or in this area, you farm for basically free. Your other option is to go back to base. I probably wouldn't in this situation, and the reason why is they are not pushing through. And then your final option is just to chill in this area and hope that these guys on the outside, who you know are there because they shot you, get lit from somewhere. So we'll see what he decides to do in this situation. What I would probably do is wait for a little while, see if they get lit, and then if they don't get lit for a while, I would probably push the north. He's asking his team to light. The unfortunate thing is we can't see the HP of like all of these tanks because they're all out of render. So we don't know whether they're full health or not. But there's a good chance that a lot of them are down to like at least half HP. But it looks like he's going for the more conservative play and coming back to base. I mean, I would have at least poked C1 and spot checked it to see if I get lit, but he decides to come back to base and play patient. And the thing is, this is definitely the safer play if you want to win the game. I don't know whether it's better or not for damage, but it is safer for damage. Like, you're guaranteed to get damage. Whereas if you go north, there's a possibility you just die. But for winning the game, this is definitely the better play. And the reason why is Stepp's camps in the south are basically impossible to break as long as you get somebody in this spot right here and you have a couple guys like in this area or in this area. Because pushing this is very hard because guys from here can shoot it, and this bush just spots everything approaching. And then pushing this way, there's a bush here, there's a hull down here. It's just very hard to deal with. Now he finds a really good angle here, which I don't think I would have found this, but it's a really good angle on this Leo. And taking this shot would be a mistake. You should just wait for him to back off. He should blind here. He does. Fortunately, he misses. Like, you could say, oh, that was a mistake because he missed. If he would have shot, he would have at least had a chance. But honestly, it was smart to hold a shot because your chance of hitting that pixel are pretty small, and the chances that he backs up are pretty high. So now your hope is that the 268V4 will spot the C4. I didn't really expect the enemies to push the south because they just didn't do that for like 3 minutes straight. But here they are, they're pushing the south after 3 minutes of just doing nothing. So it works out. He gets some free damage. And this is what I was talking about. It's really hard to push the south. That wasn't a great shot, to be honest. It's really hard to push the south because this area here, and even this area here, has shots as they yellow in. And there's kind of two safe places in the south. There's behind this rock, which in my opinion is the far superior space. But there is also a spot up here where the V4 plays. The problem with this spot is it's a little bit more open. So if the enemies get to like these positions and then also get like over here, or like over here, it's pretty hard to stay safe there. But somehow they haven't managed to find an angle on him. And this is where the aiming unit definitely helps. And you can tell the C4 player is just not good. Don't know what he was thinking, to be honest. This is pretty lucky, to be honest. First of all, the fact that the E4 did this in the first place, and second of all, I don't know if the grill is just like AFK, but for some reason nobody else on his team is shooting him. So, pretty lucky, to be honest. So he's up to 8k damage. This game has very high potential, but as I said, this spot is far inferior to the rock spot, and it looks like their E3 managed to find an angle on him, probably from over here or over here. So he goes down. Now that you've lost these areas, there's no way you're gonna get over there. It's just really unlikely. Like, you could try to take this route like you do in assault battles, where you go over here and then go over this ridge and then get there. But you're only 800 HP, so it's probably not gonna work. The best play in this situation, in my opinion, is to either sit back here and just watch the cap area, or to go back here, or you could also try to re-pressure the one line. Looks like that's what he's doing. Now you know that the Leo is still probably over here. I think the IS-7 was lit over there recently, but the Chieftain and Leo, you probably have no clue exactly where they are. One of them could be K0. And he's just holding the 1-2. I was thinking he would probably hold from like here, because this area can shoot this. Well, also, if they like take up here, then you can also shoot it, or if they go in the cap, you can also shoot, but he just decides to play here, which I think is fine. And he wants to repush the one line now. I think one reason why he might want to repush the one line is simply the fact that it creates space for his team for one, so they don't just like trap you in the corner and like surround you. And second of all, if you just sit in the corner, there's always the chance that the enemies just refuse to push in for 5 minutes and then you do nothing. Chief isn't paying attention, which is pretty lucky, so we get a nice side shot. The Grail is healthy, so we should win this engagement, unless the Leo shows up. But the Grail is firing HE, which is pretty interesting. But the Leo is making a huge misplay right now, allowing him to farm. But now the E100 died, and now this is basically guaranteed to be a loss because the Chieftain is above them. And this is why this play that he made was a little bit risky. Because if he were playing back here right now, then he can't really get pushed from any side. And sure, he wouldn't have gotten like these 2 shots on the Chieftain, but it's more of a guaranteed play. If you play back here, and they push in, you're guaranteed to get off like 3, maybe 4 shots. Whereas if you push the one line, there's always a chance that things just don't go well. Because you find yourself in a bad position. Like, this is a terrible position to be in right now. And I think he's just going to try to trade damage with the Chieftain. That's his best opportunity at this point, and that's what he does. And he gets 10,100 damage. Let me quick check. Yeah, that's all the damage he did. He didn't hit any blind shots. 200 spotting. I think he played this very well overall, though. As you can see, again, just like the S-Conqueror replay, you need to know when you can commit and when the risk is just simply not worth it. Sure, if you YOLO the top right away, a good portion of the time it will work. But the problem is, if it doesn't work even like 30% of the time, you could die with 1 or 2 shots of damage like 30% of the time, and what that does to your average stats and your average win rate is it's just not worth the risk. It's much better to play safe when you aren't sure whether you can make a play. So yeah, hopefully you learned a few things about how to play steps and some how to deal with some tricky situations and whatnot, and hopefully you learned a little bit about the Object 780. I never talked about the armor profile. So this thing, its turret, you can pen its cheeks with like, I believe like 300 plus millimeters of penetration. I'm not exactly sure. The cupola is a little bit hard to pen, but you can pen it. This middle cupola is easy to pen, but it's a smaller target. I'm not sure about this cupola. I think you can pen it. The problem with the armor profile is it has these shoulders, so you can't side scrape very easily. And then the upper plate is good when you're using your gun, you're using your gun depression a little bit because it's so sloped. But on flat ground, the lower plate is pretty weak. So yeah, that's basically it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Again, this was a long one, but I think there was a lot of good things to talk about. So, see you later. So, I just realized that Ichaztelon has another replay on step south spawn in a heavy tank. So most likely this will be attached to the Object 780 replay video, but I'm not completely sure. I only just noticed he had this replay, so I'm not sure whether this will be its own separate video. Most likely I'm gonna attach it to the 780 replay, so. Anyways, this one's in the S-Conq, and he has two loadouts. He has the HP Turbo Rammer, but it looks like he also has a Rammer V-Stab Turbo one, which is kind of surprising to me, to be honest. I mean, I can see why you might bring this, but I would only probably bring it versus like tier 8 tanks. I'm surprised he actually is choosing this loadout as opposed to the HP loadout in this matchup. So I already talked a little bit about how to play steps in a heavy tank, so if you haven't watched the 780 replay, if it was in a previous video, then I would recommend you go watch that first. If it's in the same video, then you already know the things that I've said about how to play heavy tanks on this. But let's see what he does differently and what he does the same in this replay, and we'll try to talk about the reasons why. So again, not sure why he isn't picking the HP loadout, because I don't really feel like the V-Stab helps a lot, because you're going to be fully aiming basically all your shots anyway, in my opinion. So the V-Stab isn't really going to be helping. The stabilization of the S-Conq is already so good. I'm surprised he isn't using like vents instead or aiming unit, but maybe he has his reasons. If he watches this, and then he can comment and let me know why. But as opposed to the last replay in the 780, in this matchup, there's a few more heavies, and a lot of their heavies are super heavies. They're like heavies, like S-Conq, 279E, E100, 60 TP. Heavy tanks with a lot of health, and they're not really fast heavies. IS-7's kind of an in-between because it's fairly fast, but it's also kind of just a farm tank usually, because it has terrible DPM and has terrible gun, and it has a lot of HP, so it's also kind of considered heavy. The only fast heavy they really have is a VZ. They have a lot of TDs, just like the last game. No Artie this time, which is very nice. And then the other difference, he has a lot of teammates with him, so I expect him to be more aggressive most likely. Again, it does kind of depend on what gets spotted, so I wouldn't be surprised if he hesitates for like a second, for at least a few seconds, just to see what gets spotted over here. Because for example, if the 279E comes up and takes this rock, then pushing up here is probably a bad idea. But what he can do is push to this corner. There isn't much incentive to push up here anyway, because at least as far as we know right now, there's nobody playing in this low ground, which is what this spot is really good for farming. The only thing he would really farm from here is this E4 potentially, but the E4 can pen him back because it has such high pen, and the S-Conq doesn't have great armor against like 390 pen. So he decides to go low at first. I'm assuming he'll probably go up high now because the 279 just got lit down here. Hopefully the E4 doesn't shoot him. He doesn't. And this 279 is making a big mistake by committing low. He should have stayed back here and played on the rock. But he's also got a chieftain with him, so there's not much risk to pushing up here. He's trying to shoot the Sturv. He'll probably go for... No, he doesn't go for a track shot, but Chief tracked him anyway. And now, if you pay attention, there's an E100 going down the middle of the map, so all of these guys are distracted. This guy's just a free kill right now, so there's not really much to talk about. He's just gonna farm this guy. And here you really want to hope for an ammo rack, but it doesn't seem like it's gonna happen. If your aim is good enough, then 279E Capolas are honestly not that hard to hit, especially when they're not using their gun depression. E4 gets tracked. Could retrack there. That was not a great shot, to be honest. So what's the situation right now? So just like in the last replay, they're winning this flank and they're losing the other flank, and this time they're losing it hard. But the good news is they only lost 3 tanks for this, And there's an STB who hopefully will go back here. So the base should be mostly safe if he goes there. And they already picked up 2 tanks in return, so they have a lot of momentum on this flank, so it's not like they're getting stuck on this flank and then they're gonna get surrounded. They're pushing through. Now here, probably the best, what he's probably thinking is take the outside and then these guys, you can farm them. A Sturv isn't exactly the best tank to be playing like here or anything. I mean, it's okay. If you were to go here, you could actually make a really dank crossfire, but don't expect him to do that. He probably ran all the way out. And here, the farm will begin. This should just be pure farm. He has time to get in one shot before the Foch 155 gets a angle on him. But now he kind of has to deal with him, but he pulls back so he doesn't. Shoots at the engine for fire. And this is just, there's just farm. There's not much to really say about this. But it's starting to get to the point where you're wondering whether you should go back to base or not. I think he's making the correct play here by pushing through because this S-Conk is relatively free. He might have to trade a shot or two, but he has enough HP where it's not a big deal. Not the best shot. Nice. And I don't think it's worth going for the Sturv. He's probably just trying to see if he can get an angle on the Foch, which he does. Decides to go for the front instead of the Cupola. I probably would have gone for the Cupola, but now he goes for it. And now there's only, he's up to 6k damage already, which is pretty crazy. But there's only 6 tanks left, and they're basically all in the south. And the Sturv died. So now, at this point, you're full HP, your team is winning. They're up, like the HP's close and they're up tanks, but your team is winning, let's be realistic. You want to get in the fight at this point, however possible, and the best way to do that is to push this SP2. There isn't a bunch of fast tanks with him, which will get there before him. He'll be the first one to get there. This guy's full HP, you can go hold down on him, it just makes sense to push this guy. As opposed to going back to base, which would take like a minute, or even like over a minute. And then there might just be scraps remaining for him there. You don't know for sure, because the HP is, they're out of render, so you don't know their HP. He does have to be a little bit careful, because this guy is full HP, so he's not a free kill, but the S-Conk, if you play it right, you'll get hull down on him and you can damage him for free. That thing has no armor, so. Probably wants another shot here. And I'm assuming he might just give up on killing this guy. Like, I'm assuming he's not going to chase like this, that would be stupid. He's going to go the outside route. If somebody's playing here, then he'll shoot him. But the safest route is probably to go like this. The E100 will push this way. If he backs up, then you get an angle from here and kill him. That's what's going to happen. Hopefully the E100 is smart and pushes around the north, but it appears that our E100 is not very intelligent. He's looking for the TVP. TVP's nowhere to be seen. I would be pinging the shit out of our E100 to push that guy. That's what he's doing. I was telling him to fall back. Maybe he's greedy for damage. But honestly, this guy's more of a nuisance than... He's more of a nuisance than damage at this point. Like, I would want the E100 to kill him. And finally, the E100 goes north side. But our E100, as you can tell, he's not a good player. And the way I know this is... He's just playing like a pussy, honestly. He needs to just go in and kill this guy, and he should be able to do it without taking damage, but even if he has to take damage, you just need to kill this guy right now, because he's holding up 2 of your top tier heavy tanks while the rest of your team is trying to hold off like a ton of tanks. I brought like, I don't know, 6 tanks or whatever. Fortunately, he's super low rolls, but the E100 should have him, and there he gets him. Now finally they're able to go back to the base. And this is very unfortunate. This is very unfortunate indeed. So I never would have seen this coming. I don't think it's fair to say that anybody would see this coming. TVP just gets spotted behind him and puts in 4 shots. And it's surprising that he was there because, first of all, why did he not poke earlier? Second of all, he had to have, I'm pretty sure he had to have been here the whole time, because if he would have went this way, I'm pretty sure he would have been spotted by him. So yeah, that's just really unlucky, to be honest. But as long as he can keep the rest of the enemies hull down to him, losing that HP is not a huge deal. And the enemies are in a really bad spot. The E100 is pushing across an open field. The 430U is in the open right now. And this is just a free farm. Now they're the only 2 tanks left. So it's worth it. It's probably worth it to take the risk and drive across the open field now. Because if you die in this situation, you're missing out on like 800 damage max. So yeah, didn't matter in the end anyway, but if he were just sitting down here, I would just drive across the open field at him. Even if I die, it's worth the risk. But yeah, 10,300 damage, only 700 blocked. The V-stab loadout worked out in the end. And hopefully you realize why he played this different than the last battle. Like, in which way he played it different, and the reasons why is the most important thing. He had more support, so he played more aggressive. He didn't take up here because there was no advantage to it until the 279E got lit low. He recognized that you can go wide to farm these guys. They can play, like, these guys here, I should say. Like, if they can play hull down here, but a Foch 155 can't play hull down there. Recognized that he was most likely winning the game, so he played aggressive on the SP2, especially because you can just go hull down on him, and yeah, as a result he got 10k damage. Pretty good game. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.